one characteristic that I did notice is of the family that is not common is that they were not overbearing. And I'll be very frank with you, they were not overbearing, they were not as involved as you would expect a set of parents or guardians to be in a student's life who is on a trajectory to go on to a higher tier of college or university. However, they were always holding the student accountable, the child accountable. So for instance, if, and I'm a superintendent, so I don't get very involved in specific students' lives. However, I am also a resident of the town in which I work, so I happen to know a lot of the children in that town and their families. And I'll say that in the case of this one particular student, who was a friend of my older daughter's, graduated the same class. My older daughter's a sophomore now at Manhattan School of Music in New York City. She studied musical theater. This friend, parents would be very diligent about calling the principal if the teacher didn't follow up with feedback on a homework assignment or a paper, so that the student, the child, could learn from that experience. The parents were very diligent. If the grade book, in the online grade book, we use Genesis as our student information system. The online grade book wasn't up to date on a regular level. They held not only the child accountable on some level, but also the school for following up and making sure that the child could grow. But they were not overbearing. They were not in our offices constantly. They were not pushing the child to work harder, work harder, work harder. They were giving the child some freedom, but at the same time making sure that the boundaries were there and that there was some follow-up in case there were any issues.
So so there's high expectation, but there's not too many day-to-day involvement, not like a helicopter. Okay. Yeah, I think I heard similar thing from Kevin.
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind. A couple of years ago I gave a talk at MCCC, the church there in Middletown, and I talked about, so in my own life, so when I answered the last question, I answered it as the principal of high tech. I didn't answer it as a philosophy, as a father. So I have 4 children of my own, and I actually homeschooled my own children, and we use a lot of online classes. And so as I was raising my girls, as it would end up, so as principal of high tech, the majority of my students come from Marlboro and Homedale. So growing up homeschooling my girls, my oldest daughter, her best friend was from Marlboro, a Chinese family, and my next daughter, her best friend was from Homedale, also a Chinese family. So I got to know both of those families growing up, and I always remember always asking them, like, because Chinese students always won everything, everything. They always were very successful, everything, academics, computers, and I always want to know, why is that? And I remember asking Angela Liu, some of you may know Angela from Marlboro. I said, Angela, why is that? And she said, Kevin, think of an American parent, how they are interested, say, in sports, and they send their kids to camp, and they do sports camps after school all summer, and then they excel in sports, and we applaud that because they get a scholarship to college. They said, well, that's the same thing we do with academics. We take academics very seriously, so where our kids are going to, a lot of our students go up to the Columbia Science Program on Saturdays, they're going to SAT prep camps, whatever, and we're looking to be very successful academically. And I always was in awe of Chinese parents. And so when I gave that talk at MCC, I started off by saying, I applaud the Chinese parents because I think there's very much that you do well. I mean that sincerely. As the principal of all the top kids that come out of Monmouth County, we have tremendous schools in Monmouth County, all the schools, and I deal with a lot of very successful students. And I think there's a lot that Asian parents do really, really well. So much so, I actually, at my own home, after I became the principal or the assistant principal at Homedale High School, one of the things I was tasked with was being head of the student government. And almost all the students on student government were of Asian descent, and I got to know those students well, and again was very impressed, not just with their academic ability, but their character and their commitment to school and just to do well at all things, and I was very impressed. And so much so I said, well, I would like my own kids to be like this. And so this is actually true. I actually called it Operation Asian Child. And I did it with my own kids. That's true. But there were also some imbalances that I saw in some of the families that I was working with. So what we're doing today here talking, this is what I do all the time. I talk with parents about raising their kids and what works and what doesn't work. And so I tried to take what I thought was good that I had learned from all of my Asian parents and apply it with my own kids. None of my kids have gone to an Ivy League school or even a top 50 school in the country. That's not a motive of mine, not a goal of mine as a parent. I want them to do well. I want them to pursue their passions and to do well. But the question was about family of origin, so I'm going to say I think there's a lot that Asian parents do well, a real lot, and I applaud you on the commitment to your kids, on your commitment to raising well informed and committed kids. I mean, just looking at that list that Sandra had up of all the things that you did, I mean, that's impressive. There's not a lot of parents that are doing that type of stuff, time management. That's an important thing. So again, I applaud you. So I think that's good, but I also think we have to look at some of the excess and some of the pressure that's put on. Listen, I had many families, there's way too much pressure put on these kids. And I was just speaking with a parent out there whose son goes to Bergen Academies. And so matter of fact, I just gave a talk to my parents at High Tech. It was in the newsletter, it just came out. And I told the parents that if you go to US News and World Report and you search top engineering programs, keep in mind that my school's thematic, so I have to have a focus by design because of what my school is there for, why it exists in the mission statement. And I said, if you search US News and you look at the top mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering, whatever, computer science, you won't see many Ivy Leagues in the top 10 for a specific program. If you look at top schools, you may see them, but look at programs. And so what I always tell my parents, don't pursue a school, pursue a program. Because this is what I see happen at High Tech. I see the parents telling a student to go, you gotta go to an Ivy League school, and then they don't get into that school. And this kid is devastated. And that's wrong, because this is a tremendous student, and yet he feels bad because he didn't get into Princeton. And that's wrong, because that student should not feel bad. Whereas if you pursue an interest, kind of what I heard from some of you here, and that's what I tell them, pursue what you're interested in. If you're interested in chemical engineering, then pursue that program. Listen, should you apply to, if you're in chemical engineering, Princeton, I know Princeton has a good chemical engineering program, let's just say they do. Well, if you're interested, apply to it, great, but also apply to University of Illinois and the University of Michigan and Georgia Tech. Schools that all of my students can get into and have great programs, some of them are the top 10 programs. So that's what I encourage parents. So again, I think, and going back to the original question about family of origin, again, there's a lot that you do well, but you also have to look at the excesses and the pressures that you put on your children, and there has to be a balance. I had shared some more with Sandra, and we talked last week. I won't want to monopolize the time, but maybe we'll have another time.
I'll definitely get to the piano story later. So actually, I heard a few things. One characteristic is to live nearby a Chinese family, so your kids can have a best friend there. So if you are American kind of styled, let go parents, then you can get some motivation from your neighbor. But meanwhile, I think you mentioned that you see Chinese families, Asian families have a lot of pressure on their kids. I mean, expressed or non-expressed way, but high expectation. And you mentioned it's good and bad, but it's much more good than bad, right? Then there's the balance check of the mental health. So basically, it's like push them, it's good as long as you don't break them, kind of, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was oversimplified your message.
I'll give a real quick example of my own daughter. My own daughter, middle daughter, was a junior in college. She was playing the piano. In 8th grade, she said she wanted to stop playing. And like any good Asian parent, I said no. It was December, but here's why I said no, was because we had paid that teacher and contracted for that time slot, and that woman had planned out her budget and her schedule on that money. So I said, no, you're going to have to finish June, because the year ended in June. You have to finish up till then, because she's counting on money. It's not fair for us to just stop. So I said, no, you have to continue in June, but then you can give it up if you don't want to do it. And I was sincere. But what I did do, in February, we have classical music night at High Tech, and our students all perform. We have many talented musicians. So I brought her to classical music night in hoping that she would be inspired by what she saw. And she was, and it really lit her fire, and she saw the potential was there. And then from that point on, her passion really grew for piano. She still plays today. But I would have let her leave it in June. She absolutely would have, and I wouldn't have pushed her. So it ended up becoming her choice. So that's all I did was I brought her to that event, let her to see what was possible, and that lit a fire within her, and it's something that she continues to pursue today. So there's that example.
So again, you have to be influenced by Chinese culture. Yeah, but I think I might hear very different things from this table. Jerry, you want to go? So we're talking about the, oh, actually, let me add one thing. I remember I hear from you, Kevin. You said that those kids you think quite successful overall, well-rounded. If you look at their families tend to be, their parents tend to have their own interest and passion and focus. Now that, so kids is now their mere focus, right? That kind of echoes with Scott, right? Okay. Family of origin, what kind of character you see there to make the kids good? But you'll tell me all kids are good.
All kids are good, yes. I think if you're interested in thinking about Asian families, since most of you are Asian, and I think you have to look, well, first of all, I want to tell you that until Sandra came into the school, we had a summer program that was almost all Asian children. Because the summer and we did a similar thing. We had, projects, and we did art, everything. And the Asian families felt this was a break for their children, that they could come, but we didn't ever have them come and register for the school. So then along came Sandra, and that was the beginning of an Asian invasion, which we absolutely love. But what I've learned, and a lot of it through